Welcome back to A Considerate Life. As always, if you like this video, then give it a thumbs up and comment in the comment section. That really helps us. If you like the channel, then subscribe. Today we're going to be doing, I think this is my first ever book review, so let me get my hands out of the way. The Deconstruction of Christianity by Alisa Childers and Tim Barnett. I really like this book. I just want to touch on some things, a lot of the positives and a couple of the negatives, and then we'll get out of here. If you're not aware of the term deconstruction, Childers and Barnett do a good job of looking at the range of meanings that the term can have. Anywhere from a simple examination of the foundation of one's beliefs or its historical background or its veracity, reliability, things like that, all the way to the steps leading up to abandoning Christianity, specifically evangelical Christianity, which is why I wanted to take a look at it on this channel. And this is probably the first thing that I like about this book is what I'll call its apologetics attitude. So the apologetics attitude is borne out really in these two things. First, that it doesn't shy away from people asking sincere questions about their faith, about Christianity, its historical reliability, evidences for the resurrection. And there are some of these issues, these sort of mainstream apologetics issues sprinkled throughout. The authors don't shy away from them, but they also don't do a deep dive in these things, right? If you want to read about the resurrection, read Gary Habermas, right? The authors are aware enough of these issues to give the reader some access to the discussion, but they don't deviate from their main thesis, which is this issue of deconstruction. They touch on these apologetics issues as they arise in the context of deconstruction. So they're aware of limiting the body of their text to their thesis. So that's the first thing, the apologetics attitude of the book. The second thing I like is the considerate tone, right? This channel is called A Considerate Life for a reason. I like both the idea of contemplating another person's position, but doing so with an air of respect and gentleness. These guys have tough minds with kid gloves, right? They treat the issue with all the delicacy and really pastoral approach that it warrants, right? It's not abrasive. It's not condescending. I just really like the tone of the book. It doesn't shy, but it's not condoning either. It's not so embracing of the individuals that are struggling with their faith that they give them license to just wander from the faith. So there is an apologetics and an evangelism element to it, calling people back to historical Christianity, the veracity of the word, the fact that it's reliable in terms of both belief and practice, that we can live our lives on the foundation of the word with the guidance of Jesus Christ. But as they're doing this, and this is something I really appreciated as a professor, one of the main vehicles that is effective in teaching, bringing someone from a place of ignorance to understanding, are analogies, using analogies that make something that is initially unfamiliar, familiar. There are analogies of making a house earthquake-proof, or taking apart and putting back together a car engine, or the differences that can occur in restoring a work of art. As they're going through the analogy, you're just thinking, okay, this is interesting in and of itself. Art restoration, I think, is interesting in and of itself. And then what happens is, toward the end of that description or discussion or narrative, this profound point jumps out and it sneaks up on you. And I found that very enjoyable and very effective in terms of a teaching methodology. One of the things that this book really helped me with, they give you access to a world of online apostasy and a social media environment, and give you sort of the flavor of what is going on there that I would have been mostly unaware of, making me familiar with terms like toxic theology, rooted in a kind of extension of critical theory. And the last thing I'll say is, so all of those things are really good elements of the book, the tone, the substance, but also there's a transparency. Alisa and Tim, they are extremely transparent in talking about their own struggles with faith, times where in sharing their faith or walking with someone who was going through a deconstruction period, that they felt they did them a service or a disservice, right? And actually, Tim shares an anecdote at the end of the book that I actually cried. One single tear from this eye.
Are you one of those single-tier people?
And I really appreciated that level of access to the authors as individuals. And so that was phenomenal. Now, as I was reading through the book, I'm a critical reader, and as I was reading through the book, my standard of whether or not this is a good book is if I have a question in mind, and I do this when I read my grad student papers as well. If I have a question in mind, something that they're saying raises a question, and then they're aware enough to answer that question, that's what I would have said standard, right? So if they address things that arise in my mind, and that's what I would have, and their answer is what I would have said, then it's a good book. So I think this is a good book, because a lot of the ways in which they answer these questions, I'm like, oh, that's what I was thinking, or that's what I was said. So it passes that threshold, at least for me. If I were to recommend this book, I would say the best audience for a book like this would be parents of teenagers or parents of young people in college or something like that. People that are right on the threshold of where culture and Christianity meet. And the young people who are the ones that are on these social media apps predominantly, they're going to be met with people of this ilk, of this ideology. And I think parents need to be prepared to have that discussion, have that dialogue, point their young people to resources. And as an extension of that, I would say youth pastors or pastors who have a large contingent of young people in their congregation. I think they need to read the book themselves and then be aware of it as a resource to recommend to others. Now, having praised the book for all of its merits, I would say that there's a couple demerits. And one of them is not a deficiency per se, but an incompleteness. There are some in the apologetics world that as they are looking at issues such as apostasy or deconstruction, they deal with it as a war of ideas, which is not wrong, but I would say is at this stage is incomplete. We have to view spiritual warfare not simply as a war against bad ideas with bad consequences, but as a genuine spiritual warfare. And I mean that in the most obvious way of there is a demonic attack on the church in all of these different areas of marriage and sexuality, identity and government. All of these things are being attacked. The degree to which people are willing to embrace not just bad ideas, but irrational ones, I think shows the degree to which there is a spiritual component to these discussions. In a recent roundtable discussion, though, Dennis Prager said this.
The last years in the Western world have opened me up for the first time to the belief that there may be a devil. It is almost impossible to explain the rejection of what is good and the celebration of what is wrong so radically and so quickly without recourse to some other force in the universe.
And so if there's any deficiency of the book, it leaves aside, and perhaps this is just a delimiter in terms of the scope of the text, but it really does leave aside any discussion of the spiritual warfare component of the apostasy that we see in these social media apps. Now, the second point really is more of a professional pet peeve of mine. So if you open your books to page 161, so on 161 they talk about the different ways in which the term faith can be used. The first is assent to certain beliefs. God exists, for example. The second aspect is an active reliance on or trust in what you believe is true. Both are necessary for genuine Christian faith. Furthermore, there is a distinction between your faith and what we might call the faith, basically the historic Christian faith. Now, all of those uses of the term are good and accurate, but one of the ways that the term is used, especially by Thomas Aquinas, is this, and I deal with this in my video on faith and reason. Faith is belief based on a credible witness or a credible source. The truth is, most of what we believe based on a credible source. And so since I teach epistemology and I deal with issues in epistemology, it was just a little professional pet peeve of mine that in focusing on the different facets of the term faith, that the uniquely epistemological one, that is belief based on a credible authority. Next time, I want to do a little bit of a theology of apostasy. And actually, I want to talk about something that Childers brings up in that apostasy, or this deconstruction, is not pulling the threads of a sweater. It's not ultimately an evaluation of propositions, but of a person, the person Jesus Christ. And so I want to delve into that idea just a little bit more and go into aspects of Old and New Testament theology about our fidelity to God when we don't understand him or what he's doing, right? So we'll talk about that next time.